Get us started. All right. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Margot Conahan, ACRL's Manager of Professional Development. Thank you for joining us for today's Student Learning and Information Literacy Committee Publications Team webinar, Tips for Publishing and C&RL News's Perspective on the Framework column. Just going to share a few quick housekeeping notes before we get started, and then I'll turn it over to Kay. Closed captioning is available. Just click on the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen if you'd like to enable captions. You can use the chat for comments and the Q&A box if you'd like to ask questions. We'll have time at the end for some Q&A, so please feel free to share your questions or comments. And the session is being recorded, and we'll share out the link to the recording shortly after the event. And now I will turn it over to KP May to get us started. Kay, take it away whenever you're ready.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is KP. I am one of the co-leads for the publications team of the, wait, I got to move the stuff out the way. I can never remember the name of this group. It is so long. It is the Student Learning and Information Literacy Committee, so we refer to it as SLILC. And I'm happy for y'all to be here today so I can tell you a little bit more about publishing in our column, The Perspective on the Framework. I also want to give a special shout out to my co-lead who's on the call, Darren. He just pops up in the chat. Darren, thank you for joining us. So let's get started. So here's a little bit of an agenda for today. So we're really just going to talk about the column or the committee, the column, how to submit a proposal and how to make that proposal stand out. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. At the end of the session, we will have time for Q&A. So I'll answer all questions close to the end. I don't imagine this is going to take the full 45 minutes. So just know that there will be ample time for questions. All right, so for those of you who are not as familiar with the group, SLILC is a committee in ACRL that focuses on creating opportunities and initiatives related to student learning and information literacy. The group also does a lot of work around making recommendations or suggestions for edits for the framework. And so the publications team is just a smaller group of that overall committee. And we manage and edit the bi-monthly column, the perspectives on the framework. And then we occasionally work with other publications. So if there's like a book or a larger work that needs to be edited coming from ACRL, we may be tapped to do that kind of work as well. So the perspective on the frameworks column is a bi-monthly column that gives librarians an opportunity to do two things. I feel like there are other things you can do, but mostly all columns kind of fall into one of these two categories. They're either describing how someone has used the framework, so very real world application, very on hand descriptions of how the framework is used. And then the other kind of like focus area of most of the columns is an envisioning of how the framework can be expanded to fit current needs or address persistent challenges in information literacy instruction. So with that last bit, you'll see a lot of critiques, or maybe someone has like taken a theory from another field and then applied that theory to information literacy as it relates to the framework. So all in all, you're just creating either some description of how you used it creatively, how you've challenged the framework, how you think the framework can be expanded. But once again, the framework must be the core of the discussion. So we've gotten recommendations or proposals before where people have submitted things and the framework just wasn't like, it wasn't the focal point of their writing. So we had to deny their proposal. So when you're creating a proposal, just keep that in mind. The framework has to be front and center. I will also say or make note that the framework is being edited right now by a group that is aligned with our committee. And that group is taking some feedback now and doing some research on how to elevate the framework and make it more applicable to the work of everyday librarians like yourselves. Before I move on, I also do want to note that the columns format is very flexible. So most of the times we'll have people submit articles that are very like academic in nature, but other times we do have folks submit maybe like a lesson plan that they've annotated in some way, or they may do Well, actually coming up in April, I believe, we have a column from the leaders of the group that is altering or making recommendations for edits to the framework. So they're going to release a Q&A style column in April to talk about their experience editing the framework, and their recommendations for how people could use the framework, especially in like this AI era. And so it can be very flexible in the type of format. And so I am going to show you or point out some examples today of things that we've accepted, some of our most recent publications, and all of those are basically like articles. And so I didn't want you to think like, oh, I have a more creative way that I want to present my information. We can talk about that if you submit a proposal and you're accepted. All right, any questions about the column before I move on? All right. So, what makes a proposal stand out? I don't like to have any sort of black box whenever I'm working with editing. And so, what I have for you here today is the rubric that we'll be using to judge the proposals so you can get a glimpse of what we're expecting. So, the first point that we look at, what about things like book reviews or reviews of tools for teaching information literacy? Um, Elizabeth, thanks for that question. I would say less so on the reviews of books, maybe review of tools for teaching information literacy, but everything has to be anchored in the framework. So, how the framework is related to whatever it is that you're talking about. So, a book review, no, but a review of a tool, if you review the tool and show how you applied it to your practice, absolutely, that definitely works. All right. Let's see. So, like I was saying, the first thing that we look at is relevance. So, does the proposal speak to contemporary trends or issues in information literacy on a scale of 1 to 5? We also look at novelty. So, how new is the research, or does it provide some kind of further context to establish research in order to move like a larger conversation forward, or something that has been historically challenging? The other thing is real world application. So would the proposal inspire real world application by the readers? So are you submitting a work that could be used by a wide array of people who work in academic libraries? Things that are like more specific, we consider them. But if it has that real world broad application, I guess broad application is really more of what we're looking at, then we would rank that a little bit higher. We also look at the proposal to see if there's any indication of, well, just to make sure that there's indication of scholarly writing skills. So we do judge that a little bit less because a lot of times when people are submitting proposals, maybe they're doing it quickly or they're doing it on the deadline. So it's not as big of a deal, but it is something that we do look at. And then the last thing I'm going to note is the themes. So we don't necessarily have a theme in mind whenever we're reviewing proposals. Like we don't do like a publication theme. However, themes do help us determine what things we may want to put out. So we do, when we review each of the proposals, we look at the themes and we determine like, is there a natural kind of theme emerging and we should do like a series of articles on that theme? Or we may use that information to say, well, we have so many writings on this one idea and they all just seem to be so related, so we may suggest that people work together on the work, or we may suggest they work together, or we may try to like spread the publications out on the timeline just to make sure things aren't being like cluttered. So like I said, we're not necessarily like looking for a particular thing, but that is going to be considered just naturally by way of submissions. So with that, I'm gonna leave this slide up, but I'm gonna dig back into the questions. I see we have a question in the chat and in the Q&A. The question in the chat is, how long does it take from acceptance to publication? Oh, it really just depends. It could take a while. So let's say our deadline is in December. Is it December? Yeah, our deadline is in December. We will send out like acceptance and rejection around January, February, and then the first publication that comes out of the round of acceptance would be a publication in August. So that's like what, February, and then if you get the first slot, that's February to August. So that's what's math? March, April, May, June, July. It's like 7, 6 months. And then think again, if you get accepted and your article is put further down on the calendar, it could come out next year or something, or in 2027, because we do have some things queued up already. We just have two. So I think that the shortest you can think is 6 months. The longest you can think of is like a year, so to speak. So that's a really good question. Thank you, Mark. Megan asked a question in the Q&A. So, hi, if a new version of the framework is near completion, how does it impact what perspective you might consider publishing? That's a good question, Megan. So that's one of the things that we are waiting to get more information on from the group that is editing the framework. We don't have the details about we have details about around when they want to publish it, but we don't have details like a particular date. So what I have told our committee is that we'll look at publications, or we'll look at our submissions. We'll organize the submissions to be completed, or we'll make sure that we have articles that are going to go on the calendar for 2026. And then anything that's for 2027 and beyond, we may respond to the proposer and say, hey, the new framework just came out. Can you make sure that your work still matches what is being presented in the framework? So we'll definitely work with you if the new framework comes out and there may be some mismatch between what you wrote previously and then what is presented in the new framework. So yes, we're definitely not like draconian about that. We definitely will work with you. Any other questions about the rubric, about the timeline? Of course, Megan. All right. So here are some recent publications. These are actually the most recent publications. In order to find columns or publications in our column, it's not very straightforward. So I'm actually going to show you what you would do. Let's see. Just going to go to Google ACRL, CR. So if you go to the C&RL website that I'm going to drop here in the chat, you would have to, in the search bar on the top, in quotation marks, you put perspectives on the framework and then search, and then search. Okay, it's going, it's going. There we go. All right. So all of these articles should be columns or publications in our column. Even if you don't see the name perspectives on the framework in the title or anything, you can trust that these are all going to be from the column. So as you see here recently, I think that a lot of the things that we've seen have been a little bit more like theoretical. So a lot of people have been like introducing theories from education into library and information science. We have one that's in the queue that's coming out, and they are talking about how the framework makes very minimal reference to reading or reading practices. So like I said, it can be something very theoretical. It can be something very practical. Just bringing it all back to the framework and how the framework can be used to elevate our instruction, to elevate our practice, things like that. Or like I said, a critique of the framework. Because when we're editing the documents, we're not editing your ideas necessarily. We're just making sure that you don't misrepresent the framework. So if you say something about the framework, and as an editor, we know that's not necessarily true, we may make a comment to say, well, this is not necessarily true of the framework. This is a misrepresentation. Or we may give you advice about how to make things more succinct, but we don't change your ideas. That's not the purpose of our editing process at all. We're just trying to make sure your idea sounds applicable and is understood by the most people. Go back to this. Is it going to take me to the beginning? No. Um, so with all those things being said, I'm going to go ahead and drop the link up. Bitly, wow. All right. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link to the submission form. Go ahead and bookmark this. The submission form says that submissions are due, is it December the 19th? Yes, December the 19th. This day may change depending on how many submissions we get. I will tell you right now, we have a total of 6. Also, since you came to this, I'll give you a little heads up. A lot of the submissions are about AI. Now, I don't know what that means for how we may present the column. We may sprinkle AI columns throughout the years or throughout the year, or we may do like a dedicated string of AI publications within a certain time period. But I do want you to know that if you have something to say and it's not related to AI, we still want to hear it. Okay. And I think that a lot of people are submitting things about AI because it's so timely, which makes sense. So they'll definitely get credit for relevancy, but theoretical things are always relevant because they influence practice, right? Giving us examples of how you use the framework in your practice is still also relevant if it's not related to AI. So I do want to make sure that that's clear to everyone that we don't, once again, we haven't created any boundaries around what we want to publish. We're accepting everything and kind of seeing how things fall. So all ideas are welcome. And I do want to say another thing too, in terms of like strengthening your proposal. I would suggest we just added this question here that says, can you provide any references that inspired your work? It's optional. There are a couple of proposals that I've seen that are wonderful without references, but I do think that providing references could be a good way for us to see the history of the topic that you're discussing, and making sure that whatever you're saying about it is one of the most recent things that is being said on the topic. So I think that will be important as well. However, like I said, it's optional. So don't feel wedded to having references. You can just get on here and be like, you know what, I'm mad about this. So let me just submit a proposal. And we will accept it. We like all feelings, good feelings, bad feelings, we take it all. All right. Any questions about submitting a proposal? All right, beautiful. Oh wait, can you post the link again? Yeah, of course. Oh, this is the other one. There you go. All right. Let's see. You have another Q&A question. Roughly how many proposals do you typically receive? So the last time we sent out a call for proposals, I believe there were 36 or 33. Um, the last time a call for proposals was sent out was like a year and a half ago. So as you can tell, there is a lot of planning that goes into this, which is why I say like we may accept your proposal, but you may not get published until like the following year. So yeah, like I said, 33 or 36 was the number last year. I imagine we'll get pretty close to that number. But the amount of proposals that were received like prior to that, I wasn't on the committee, so I'm not really sure about that. And we accept about, I think I put this in. I think we're accepting about 4 to 5. Um, but once again, it all depends on the themes of the proposals that we get, and it also depends on that timeline of editing the framework. Um, yeah, because if we come into a situation where the framework editing process causes someone to have to make substantial changes and then submit for later publication, that's something we can also talk about. Yeah. Thanks for the question. All right, so now we have more time for question and answer. Like I said, I'm not going to keep this whole time. I just wanted to use this as an opportunity for y'all to put a face with the process. and also for you to hear from someone who's going to be reviewing your proposals. So if you have any questions, feel free to come off of mute or drop them in the chat. If not, I'll just stick around and hang out, just in case. So any other questions? Yes, I can do that. Let's see. This is the rubric slide. The link to submit a proposal, I'm going to drop it back in the chat. So it should be. Let me know if that doesn't work, Mark. Any other questions, concerns, comments? Question. Is the column peer reviewed? Yes. So the review process is we review the content. So when I say we, this is people who are on the committee review it, and it is I think it's open. Is it open peer review? Yes, it's open. I do see your names. And the link is not coming to everyone. Oh no. Oh, that's my fault. I'm so sorry, y'all. Thank you, Margot. Um, the folks who are editing the column is going to be myself, Darren, who's on the call, and other current librarians. And then once we do the review, once we peer review it, we send back edits, and then you send it back to us. We review it again, and then it goes to um, C&RL for them to do some editing on it as well. All right, anything else? And I do want to make sure that everyone knows that we're doing that. Oh my God, what was I about to say? So much going on in my head today. Well, something about peer review. If I think of it again, I'll answer it. But I do see another question in the chat. Can we submit feedback on the framework to the revision team, not necessarily for publication? Yes, Mark, let me see. I wonder if there used to be a web page where you could go and submit feedback to the team. Let me see. Um, Let's see, let's see. If I can't find it today, though, I will make sure you get it. This one. Okay, I know, I know we have a library guide. I don't see it on the library guide. So no, what I'll do is I'll make sure I'll make sure that I get that information to Margot. And Margot, whenever you send out like the debrief about this, could you send that as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I do know that they had the survey, which has since closed because they've been
Yeah.
spending a lot of time synthesizing that. But I believe there'll be other opportunities for feedback, especially on the revisions that they'll be
Mhm.
proposing.
Any other questions? All right. Well, I do also want to, while it's on my mind, I'm gonna send y'all. What was the name of that? Or maybe actually Margot. In that follow-up email, could you also send a link to the webinar that we hosted last spring? So just to give y'all some context, last spring we hosted a webinar about, or it was featuring librarians who have published either book chapters or articles or have been editors before. And so if you're new to um, researching or writing or trying to get published, I think that watching that webinar may be useful. Margot, is that something you could do or?
Yep, that is
Okay.
easy. No problem.
Wonderful. Yay. Okay. I promise that's the last thing I have. If there are no other questions, I'll let y'all go. Here is let me go and find the email address for the column. So if you have any questions, you should reach out to us at, oh, I mean, let me find our Gmail or our email address. Oh no, don't look at his stuff. Okay, no, he's fine. He's a great guy. All right. It is. Can I not copy that? Anyway, I don't want to go too deep into the emails, especially on the recording. So Margot, I'll also send you our email address to send to everyone.
We can include all of that info in the little follow-up email. No problem.
Yes. Thank you. Appreciate you, Margot. Well, that's all I have. Thanks y'all for joining. If you have any questions, like I said, once you get that email from Margot, you'll be able to reach out to us. We really appreciate y'all for coming. And we would love, love, love to have your submissions. So thank you.
And thank you, KP, for leading this session today. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.